and welcome. My name is Lexi Jong, and here I like to talk about luxury beauty. Today, we're going to be talking about the new Nars High Profile Cheek Palette. So you can see even the box here is textured, to mimic the palette here. So this black part here, it is raised and layered and so forth. And we have pink metal. So this is the High Profile Cheek Palette. There are 6 shades: Nude Review, Spin Off, High Demand, Hit It Off, Showdown, and Just Lust. This is 0.1 ounces or 3 grams times 6. So each shade is 3 grams. And these are made in Italy with an 18-month shelf life. There is a mirror on the top, and you can see it does come with a plastic cover. And you can see these are the 6 shades. This one here is obviously a highlighter. Now, this is a firmly pressed, like big chalet type formula. So let me go ahead and swatch these for you first. This is the first row. Okay, and here is the second row. All right, so we have, kind of like a deep gold highlight here. It's like a deeper antique gold. For me, it's a little bit too dark for my complexion. It is something though that you could wear on the eyes. And then we have this is like a tawny brown with like a touch of red. You can see that there are some reddish undertones in there, along with some like yellowish golden undertones as well. So we've got kind of this like warm tawny brown shade here. And then this next one, okay, so that was the middle shade. This one here, it looks kind of like a brownish shade in the pan. And there is some brown in here, but it's like a brownish rose. So you actually see a little bit more of the rose on the skin. And it's a really nice, like kind of like nude rose. Then in the first shade on the bottom row, we have kind of this shade here. You can see, I just want to show you how different these look in the pan versus on the skin. These two actually look fairly similar. This one in the middle is going to be like a brighter, more translucent peach, whereas this is going to be like a dustier peach, but you can see how close they are to each other. This one is like peach with a touch of brown versus this one, which is pretty much a pure peach with a touch of coral. And then this last shade here is it's a true rose. So it's kind of I would just say it's like rose pink here. And you can see that these can blend out very sheerly because these are such a firmly pressed baked blush. I have quite a few demos showing you how they go on with different brushes. And, this formula, it's almost like a gel to powder kind of formula when you touch it. The big chalet, it does have like a little bit of that texture. It's not creamy. It's fully pressed and dry and so forth. But it does have like a little bit of a different consistency, in my opinion. Now, I have heard people asking if these all kind of look the same on the face, and I'd like to know what you guys think after you see all of the shades on my face, but I think on my complexion, they don't. There are some shades that do look more similar in the face, like these ones here. These two are a little bit more similar as well, but I do notice a difference. I think it's kind of depend on your undertones. I think if you have warmer undertones, these shades are going to look a lot more similar than if you have cooler or more neutral undertones, where you'll see a little bit more of the differences in those shades. So let's go ahead and look at the demos with the different brushes and the different shades, and then we'll come back and talk about my thoughts and this formula. All right, so we are going to try out the Nars cheek palette. And actually, I want to try out this top shade here and see how this looks. So I'm using the Chikuhodo GSN05. I'm just gonna pounce this on a little bit. Okay, so that's a little bit I don't know, I didn't expect it to be quite so pigmented. I guess I should have been more prepared for that, but let's move on to this side here and then we'll blend it out. Okay, I'm gonna wipe the brush off on my cloth here. And I'm doing more of a pouncing motion. Okay, I'm gonna actually take my foundation brush that I used before on this side to kind of mute it a little bit, just whatever's left on there. All right, so there's that shade. I think let's go ahead and add like a little bit of the pink right below it, just a little bit further out. So just gonna use the same brush here, just kind of popping that on. All right, so there's that. I feel like just add a little bit more of that brown up here to the temples. Wipe off the brush and then blend that a little bit better. All right, so here are the cheeks. Let me show you from a distance. I'll take the Sonia G Jumbo Concealer into the gold shade, and I'm just gonna get a little bit of this up and just put it right here. You know, I don't really see that. Let me get a little bit more product. I don't think I picked up that much. Oh, I can see it now, but it's like, it's deep. That shade's too dark for me. Just gonna add a little bit to both sides so I can even that out better. And I'm just gonna kind of take this brush again, kind of soften that a little bit, diffuse it. All right, so there's that. I don't know, I think that highlighter is just too dark. Let me show you again. So here it is from a distance. You can definitely see like that bronzy gold tone of the highlight there. So it's a little bit too deep. Maybe a different application method will help, but I really just think the shade is just a little bit too dark. All right, so we're gonna go into this shade in the Nars palette, and I'm using the Sonia G Mini Base. And we're just gonna kind of pounce this onto the skin. So there's that. Let's try buffing that just a touch. I think I'm just gonna add a little bit more. All right, and let's move on to the other side here. So this is the blush and the first one in the bottom row from a distance. All right, so I added just a little bit more blush using the Sonia G Smooth Buffer and just kind of pouncing that on. And I do have some highlights. So you can see a little sheen there. I use the Givenchy Shimmery Pink. This is the pressed highlighter from the permanent line. And I finished my makeup. I'm gonna move you out and show you the cheeks again. All right, so here is the Nars palette. Again, we're still using that first shade in the bottom row. And again, the highlight is the Givenchy pressed highlight in Shimmery Pink. I have the Westman Atelier iPods on in Rendezvous and the Cislea foundation in 0R Vanilla. On my lips is La Perla Lip Balm, and yeah, that's everything. So the lip balm is in Petal Lips. All right, so I'm gonna take the Surratt cheek brush. We're gonna go into this peachy shade here. And you know, this is a squirrel hair brush. So I've been working with things that were a little bit denser, but I figure I might as well just see what goes on with something very soft and fluffy. I'm actually not expecting much color to come up. Okay, so there's more color than I expected. So you can see I'm kind of really getting some product on the brush here. And that gives a nice flush then. That's actually a really pretty like peachy shade here. All right, I'm just going to take a hint of this shade here, the one right above it, and just going to get a little bit of this and stick this kind of towards the back of it, more towards the hairline. You can definitely see that it definitely added pigment there. Much deeper, a little bit browner, but it's got, still has like that peachy vibe to it. You can see that they've got similar tones. So I'm just kind of blending those two together a little bit there. You can see it stays deeper at the back, which is what I'd like. All right, so this is a little bit too much blush for me. I'd like it to be a little bit less dramatic today with this light look that I'm going for, but this way you can really see the color. So let me back out for a second and you can see it from a distance. So this is what it looks like. You can definitely see the difference in tone here, where this looks more like a peachy brown versus more of a more vibrant peach here with like a touch of pink. And there's a little bit less product on this side, so this side's a little bit softer. All right, so today we're going to try the Refer 05 brush, and we're going to mix these two shades together. And on my skin, I have the Sisley, it's the Sisley Le Teint. Now let me just show you how well this picks up. You can see that you're not going to get a ton of product. It is firmly pressed, you know, so there we go. And that's all I have on my skin so far for foundation is the Le Teint. I don't have any powder or anything on. You can see that once you get the product on the brush, it goes on very well, and actually applies just fine. You can see that you can really build up the pigment on these. And all right, so here's the blush with the Refer 05. Right, and here's the blush from a distance. All right, so I hope that was helpful. And I have to say that these blushes, you know, it's a really nice palette, different combinations. It does lean warm overall. I mean, this shade here is going to be really the only one that's like, it's really more neutral, but this is going to be your coolest shade. This is a little bit cool for a peach, but pretty much everything leans fairly warm here. And because of this formula, you know, it is really easy to pick up the pigment with your fingers for swatching, but with a brush, it's much more, it's a little bit easier to use a stiffer brush. So something like the Sonia G Smooth Buffer is one that works really well with these. Anything that's a little bit stiffer or more firm will pick up the product a little bit more strongly. However, if you are fair skinned like me, if you go in with a fluffier brush, you know, if you want to pick up the pigment, just pinch the bristles to pick up the pigment, and then it actually goes on very nicely. And these can go on in very sheer buildable layers, which for somebody with light skin, that can be really key so that you don't overdo it. So that's just something to note. So the formula itself, you know, I have some highlighters with this formula. I don't really have blushes with this, you know, such a firmly pressed formula. And it took me a while to get used to it. You know, I'm kind of like on the fence with the formula. I think it's okay. It's not my favorite. I do prefer something that's a little bit creamier, or sometimes even something a little bit powdery, provided it's not like a chalky powder, just to have a little bit more ease of application. But I do think that once you put this on, it gives a very natural kind of melted in look to the skin. So I think, you know, it actually looks really nice on. And if it doesn't bother you to, you know, have a firmly pressed blush, it's actually a really nice product. So I like this palette, but I don't love it because I think the formula is only okay for me. It's just not a personal preference, but I don't see anything wrong with the formula. As for the color story, I do think it leans overall warm. Really, I really think it's just these two that look the most similar on the skin. You know, these two are vaguely similar, but again, you've got something that's cooler versus warmer. And you can see that this one is definitely going to have more like brown tones in it versus like just the rose here. So I think the color story is actually a very nice color story. I think it's going to work well for a lot of people. You know, I like it. The highlight is way too dark for me, in my opinion. I don't like it on my face. It is something I could use on the eyes, and I have tested it out that way. You know, honestly, with so much eyeshadow, I probably won't really use it. So it's just not something that I'm gonna be like, oh, let me dig that out and use that for my eyes. But if you're in a pinch, it does work. It looks nice and no problems with performance on the eyes. I don't know whether or not it is technically an eye safe product, so I'm not recommending it, but I have tried it myself with no issues. So just something to note, you know, if you're planning on using it on the eyes regularly, I would definitely check the ingredients, make sure everything is eye safe and appropriate. You don't want to mess around with your eyes. So as for this in general, I think it is a nice palette. Color wise, you know, I don't think there's anything like totally unique or different about these, but I think it is a nice palette. And I have to say, I like it, but don't love it. Let's go through a few comparisons. First, let's start with a couple of Hermes blushes. This is number 23, Rose Blush. And we're gonna put this right here. I wanted to see how that compared to this brighter peach shade. I do find them to be very similar. You can see that they're pretty close. There's slightly more pink in the Hermes than in the Nars, but those are similar. And then we also have number 49, Rose Tan from Hermes. And we're gonna put that one right up here. Oops, just a little slip. Okay, so I thought that would be closest to this one here, the second shade. I do think it is, but it's, this one has a little bit more red and more depth to it than Rose Tan. This one here is a Chanel Rose Petal. Put that right down here. Okay, it's a little bit pinker. Yeah, it's kind of like a cross between the bright peach and the rosy mauve shade, but it's lighter. And just a couple more Chanel. This is number 2, Rose Bronze. And keep in mind that even though the Chanel ones appear lighter, once you apply them with a brush, they're really not that much lighter. So doesn't quite go. The undertones are going to be a little bit cooler in Rose Bronze, I think, than the bronzier shades in the Nars. And then we also have number 80, Jersey. And this one here, let's try to put this one up here. Yep, no, it's going to be a little bit cooler as well. I was thinking it might be similar to this, but you can see there's a little bit more pink tones in Jersey, whereas we've got more of those like golden tones in the Nars palette. And then we're also going to look at some Pat McGrath blushes. So this one here is Paradise Venus. And I think this is a really unique shade from Pat McGrath, but it did remind me of this shade here. So let me swatch those next to each other. So in the Nars palette, that's this one here. So the last one in the top row. Just gonna swatch that. We'll swatch it right like this. Okay, and you can see that they are kind of fairly similar in color here. And look at the way this stretches out in the Pat McGrath compared to the Nars. I think they're gonna be pretty similar on the skin. And then we also have Desert Orchid, and we're gonna put this one top here. I thought that might be more similar to this, but again, this one has pinker tones. It's a little bit warmer than Jersey, but it's not quite as golden as the one in the Nars palette. Then we have Nymphette. Don't really think this is gonna go with these here, but I figure it's worth checking. Yeah, it's just gonna be too cool in tone for anything in the Nars palette. You can see there's a little bit of that plum vibe mixed into the pink there. And then our last shade is going to be Nude Venus. Let's put that down here. And again, there's too much pink in here, but I'd say that's going to probably be closest to this one here, which is the first shade in the bottom row of this palette. So let's check that real quickly. Yeah, no, they don't quite go. So yeah. All right, so that's it for my comparisons. And I hope this was helpful. Overall, I think it is a nice palette. I don't think it's a must-have in my opinion, but you know, I think it's an interesting formula. And if you don't mind this firmly baked formula for blush, it actually applies very nicely to the skin. And I think the finish of the formula is very, very lovely. So I think it's actually a nice palette. And yeah, so for me, I like it. And I hope this was helpful. If you enjoyed it or found it helpful, please give me a thumbs up. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. And I will see you very soon. So have a great day and stay safe and healthy.